It was the night of the great peace meeting. The Hall of Accord was filled with people from many worlds, but this story was not about stars or galaxies. It was about a woman named Queen Lyrillin and a man named Captain Ethan Cole. The air in the hall was calm and heavy with purpose, as if everyone inside knew that something important, maybe even history itself, was about to happen. The hall was huge, built from white stone that glowed softly under the lights above. Long tables stretched across the floor, and hundreds of seats were taken by leaders, soldiers, and scholars. Soft music played in the background, but it only made the tension feel louder. No one wanted to say the wrong thing. No one wanted to be the reason for another war. Queen Lyrillin sat at the far end of the grand table. She looked calm and strong, though something about her eyes showed she was tired of endless rules and lines written in old books. She had carried her crown for too long, and every diamond on it felt like a weight. Across the hall stood Ethan Cole. He was a captain from Earth, known not for fame or charm, but for quiet courage and careful words. His uniform carried medals, though he never spoke of his victories. When people saw him, they did not see a hero, they saw steadiness, someone who would rather build bridges than raise weapons. The meeting began with speeches. Officials spoke in long sentences that sounded beautiful but meant very little. They promised fairness and spoke of unity, but everyone could feel that their hearts were guarded. When the speaker from the council asked for final comments before the signing, Queen Lyrillin stood up. The room grew still. Her gown shimmered as she stepped forward. She looked around the hall, scanning the faces of all the leaders and warriors who watched her. Her voice, when it came, was calm but carried deep strength. "I've spent my life leading my people through fear and through peace," she began. "We have written many treaties, yet our hearts have never truly rested. We defend our borders, but not our dreams. We settle disputes, but we do not heal." A quiet murmur passed through the crowd, but she raised her hand gently, silencing them. "Do you know why humans give hope to others?" she continued. Her eyes turned toward Captain Ethan Cole. "Because you live with such passion that others cannot help but remember what it feels like to care. You are flawed, yet you love fiercely." She paused, taking a breath as the room held its silence. Then, with a clear and steady voice, she said words that cut through the hall like a blade through glass. "I wish you were my husband, human." For a moment, no one spoke. The music stopped. Even the lights seemed to flicker faintly, as though the world itself was unsure how to continue. Every face in the hall turned toward her and then toward Ethan. Ethan froze. His mind raced, but his body would not move. The weight of her words pressed on him like a wave. He could see the meaning behind them. It was not romance, but something deeper. She was not asking for love. She was speaking the truth of what her heart longed for, the strength of human emotion, the freedom to live with feeling rather than duty. Guards looked to one another, wondering if they should act. Advisors whispered, trying to decide if the queen had lost her mind or spoken something new and dangerous. A few delegates stood in shock, expecting her to laugh and call it a jest. But she did not. She looked straight at Ethan and waited. He swallowed, every muscle tight. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "you honor me with words I do not fully understand." "You will," she replied softly. "Not now, perhaps not soon. But one day you will see that my wish was not a jest, but a truth our people have forgotten." The silence stretched on. Somewhere in the back, a glass fell and shattered against the floor, breaking the spell. The others began to move and whisper again, but no one could erase what had just happened. That night, long after the people had left the Hall of Accord, Ethan stood alone. The echo of her voice still lingered in his mind. Outside, the lights of the city glowed like distant fires. He wondered if peace could truly begin not from ink and command, but from something as strange and heavy as the heart of a single person. He did not understand the power of her words yet, but he knew one thing. Clearly nothing in the universe would be the same after that silence. The hall was still heavy with silence, even after the meeting ended. The people went back to their rooms quietly, whispering about what they had just witnessed. No one knew what to say about the Queen's words. Some said it was a bold act of peace. Others said it was madness. For Queen Lyrillin, it was something much deeper than either. She sat alone in her grand chamber, the lights dimmed low. Her crown rested on the table beside her, the jewels catching faint reflections of the city lights outside. The queen was used to carrying the burden of her people, but tonight her heart felt heavier than usual. She thought about the face of Captain Ethan Cole when she had spoken. His surprise had been genuine, his confusion honest. His expression had stirred something in her that had been quiet for too long. A soft knock came to her door. Her advisor, a woman named Clara, entered with caution. Clara had served the queen for many years and knew how to read her moods. She took one look at her ruler's face and understood that tonight was not about politics. "My queen," Clara said gently, "the council is asking for an explanation. They fear your words have caused trouble." Lyrilyn smiled faintly. "Of course they do. They fear anything that does not fit into their plans. But I spoke the truth, Clara. Sometimes truth sounds like trouble to those who prefer order over honesty." Clara hesitated. "Do you mean to stand by what you said?" The queen nodded slowly. "I do." At that same hour, Captain Ethan Cole sat in his quarters, staring out a wide window. The city below glowed with thousands of soft lights. He could still hear the queen's voice in his head. Her words had been sharp and gentle all at once. "I wish you were my husband." He tried to make sense of it, but every possible reason led to more questions. His communicator chirped. It was his superior, Commander Lewis. "Captain, are you aware of the situation you are in?" Lewis asked. His voice carried both concern and frustration. "Yes, sir," Ethan replied calmly. "The message we received from the Queen's Council states that she might have personal intentions toward you," Lewis said, choosing his words with care. "You must be careful. Such emotions can complicate diplomacy." Ethan gave a short laugh, one without humor. "With respect, sir, I don't think the Queen is in love with me. There's something else behind her words. Maybe she wanted to show her people what peace requires." There was a long pause before the commander responded. "You may be right, but still, the higher council wants you to keep your distance. Stay alert, Captain. Everyone is watching." After he ended the call, Ethan rubbed his eyes and leaned against the glass. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes judging him, waiting for a misstep. But under that noise of duty and caution, he could still feel something honest in the Queen's words, as if she had spoken not just to him, but to every person who had ever been tired of endless talks and cold alliances. The next morning, the palace buzzed with rumors. Journalists called it the proposal that froze the stars. People across worlds debated whether it was an embarrassment or a symbol of courage. Lyrilyn did not reply to any message or interview. Instead, she prepared for another meeting this time, a private one. Ethan was summoned to meet her in the royal garden. He was uneasy when he arrived. The garden was quiet except for the sound of wind through tall crystal trees. Queen Lyrilyn stood near a pool of clear water. She turned when she sensed his presence. "Captain Cole," she said softly, "I thank you for coming." "Your Majesty," he said under his breath, bowing slightly, "you asked for me, and I came. But I must admit, last night's words have left many questions." "Yes," she said with a sad smile, "and I owe you an answer." She looked up at the glowing sky, her expression far away. "Do you know what it feels like to lead people and still feel alone? To guide a world but never touch its heart anymore?" Ethan shook his head, but listened carefully. "I wished you were my husband, not because I seek love or power," she continued quietly. "I said it because I wished my world was like yours, for a moment free, for a moment alive, for a moment true. Your people live as if each day could be their last. Mine have forgotten what that means." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Then you spoke not to me as a man, but to my kind as an idea, perhaps," she whispered. "But you, Ethan Cole, remind me that peace is not signed on paper. It is chosen, heart by heart." The air between them was still. The soft wind rustled her gown and carried her scent like a memory. Ethan nodded slowly. "Then maybe what you said last night wasn't madness after all." She smiled faintly. "Madness is simply another name for truth that arrives early." They stood there in silence, two souls from different worlds, neither sure of what tomorrow would bring, but both understanding that something had changed forever in that single sentence spoken before the Hall of Accord. The days after the meeting were full of confusion and tension. The Queen's words had traveled farther than anyone expected. Every screen, every newscaster, Every political advisor was talking about what had happened in the hall. What began as a conference for peace had turned into a story told by everyone in the galaxy. Some said the queen had lost her mind. Others said she had spoken from her heart in a way no ruler ever dared. Queen Leerlin tried to keep calm, but inside she was torn between pride and worry. She had spoken the truth, and she did not regret it. Still, she knew that the halls of power were not kind to truth. Her own council now looked at her with questioning eyes. The room where they met each morning felt colder than ever. "Your Majesty," Councillor Bennett said one morning, his voice sharp but controlled, "the ministers are unsettled. They believe your remark to the human captain has weakened our position." Leerlin looked at him steadily. "Has it weakened us or frightened those who fear change?" He frowned. Change must be planned, not spoken in poetry before the entire Concord. The Queen's lips curved slightly. Poetry moves hearts faster than plans. Bennett had no reply. The others around the table shifted uncomfortably. They had served her for years, but none of them understood the reason behind her words. Only Clara, her closest friend and advisor, seemed to trust her still. When the meeting ended, Clara followed the Queen out to the palace balcony. The sunlight reflected off tall towers and flowing rivers far below. Leerlin rested her hands on the railing and looked at the horizon. "Did I make everything worse?" she asked quietly. Clara shook her head. "You made them see something beyond their comfort. That always feels like chaos before it feels like hope." Leerlin smiled. "You sound wiser than most of our council." Clara laughed softly. "That may be why they seldom ask for my opinion." Meanwhile, Captain Ethan Cole was under his own kind of pressure. On the ship where he stayed, every officer treated him differently now. Some respected him more, believing that a queen had chosen him out of all men. Others mocked him kindly, whispering jokes behind his back. But Ethan took none of it to heart. He kept to his duties, every action measured, every order clear. Still, at night when the corridors went quiet and the lights dimmed, he thought about her words again. They had felt heavy that first night, full of mystery. Now they began to sound like a call for something deeper. He thought about what she said later in the garden, about being a ruler, but never touching the heart of her people. It reminded him of his own home on Earth, how people there also built walls of pride and forgot to listen. One evening, Ethan was called for another meeting. Commander Lewis waited for him in a small office that overlooked the city. The commander's face looked tired. "Ethan, the council wants to send a new envoy for the treaty. They think your presence here is a distraction," Lewis began carefully. Ethan nodded but said nothing. "Argued for you to stay," Lewis continued. "You're steady, and you've earned the trust of the Queen, but they are afraid of the attention this situation brings." "I never asked for attention," Ethan said simply. "I know," said Lewis. "That's why they picked you in the first place." As Ethan left the office, he knew what he had to do. He would not let politics destroy something good. If the Queen was willing to risk her honor for true peace, then he could do no less. Later that night, without escort or warning, Ethan walked to the palace. The guards hesitated when he approached, but they knew his face and did not stop him. He found the Queen once again in the garden, standing beside the same pool of clear water. The night air was cool, and the stars above scattered their light across the quiet city. She turned, surprised but not alarmed. "Captain Cole, I did not summon you, I know," he said, breathing slightly heavier from the climb. "I could not leave things unsaid." She looked into his eyes, curious. "Then speak, Captain." He drew a slow breath. "You spoke of truth and courage. If what you said in the hall was your truth, then let mine be this. I would rather be a soldier standing beside a ruler who dares to speak her heart than stay silent among those who fear it." Her eyes softened. "You risk much by saying that." "Peace always comes with risk," he replied. "Real peace must start somewhere. Perhaps it started when you spoke those strange, bold words." Leerlin looked away for a moment, her face catching the pale glow of light. Then she smiled, gently this time. "Perhaps it did, Captain Cole." They stood there, silent yet not alone, both feeling the world shift in small but certain ways. The path ahead was uncertain. The old rulers would fight to hold their order. Yet in that quiet moment beneath the wide night sky, two hearts held the same thought, that peace would not be written by councils or guarded by armies, but by brave words spoken at the right time by those who still believed in hope. The next morning began with a sky the color of silver. The city below the palace was alive with talk, movement, and uneasy hope. The people spoke softly of the strange friendship between their queen and the human captain. Some felt fear, some felt wonder. No one could stop thinking about it. The queen's words had changed something that no treaty ever had. Inside the palace, the council gathered again. The long table was covered with documents and screens showing messages from other worlds. Every leader demanded answers. Some had called the Queen's act an insult, others a miracle. Queen Lyrillin entered the room quietly. When she walked in, everyone stood. Her face was calm, but her eyes carried a quiet fire. She took her seat at the head of the table, placing her hands flat on the cool surface. Counselor Bennett began to speak right away. Your Majesty, the human leader from Earth requests a statement. They demand to know if your words in the hall were meant as policy or a personal emotion. They were both, she said, her voice even. Because policy without emotion is empty. Words without heart mean nothing, the council murmured uncomfortably. Clara sat beside the Queen, watching her with silent faith. Your Majesty, another advisor said sharply, you may have changed centuries of diplomacy with one sentence. The humans are waiting for an answer, and so are our allies. The Queen's eyes turned toward the wide window behind them. Sunlight touched her hair in golden lines. Then we shall give them one, she said. What kind of answer? Asked Bennett, worried. The truth, she said simply. A few hours later, the great hall of Accord was prepared again. The banners of every world hung from high pillars. Guards lined the walls. Cameras and messengers filled the gallery, waiting to send her next words across the galaxies. She had planned this speech without telling anyone. All she had said to Clara that morning was, "It is time." Captain Ethan Cole arrived quietly and stood among the human delegates. His uniform was sharp, his expression strong. He had not been sure why he was invited, but deep down, he knew the Queen would not act without reason. When Lyrillin entered, the entire hall fell silent again, just as it had the first time. But this silence was different. It was heavy with expectation. She stood on the raised platform and spoke slowly, every word measured and clear. I spoke before you once, and my words brought confusion. Some of you thought it was an act of emotion. Some thought it was a mistake. But I will not take them back. I repeat them now with purpose and truth. The audience leaned forward, waiting. I said I wished you were my husband, human, she continued. And what I meant was this. I wish our worlds were joined not by paper or law, but by trust and understanding. I wish our people would care for one another as closely as to hearts united. I wish for a bond that cannot be broken by pride or fear. Her voice grew steadier, filled with warmth. Today I do not offer another treaty written by lawyers. I offer a promise of shared life. We will no longer treat our friendship as a strategy. We will treat it as a vow of kinship. Let our worlds stand as partners, equal in soul and purpose. The crowd began to whisper. Some faces brightened with emotion, others darkened with worry. Ethan stood frozen, stunned by the bravery of her words. Lyrillin looked directly at him then. Her eyes met his across the vast hall. Captain Cole, she said, soft, yet clear enough for all to hear. Your world has shown us courage in ways we once forgot. You have reminded us that peace cannot be forced, only chosen. For that, I thank you not as a queen, but as a woman who still believes peace can live. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ethan stepped forward, not as a soldier, but as a man who understood her meaning. He walked to the base of the dais and bowed slightly. Your Majesty, he said, his voice strong but gentle. If this is your vow, then let me speak for my kind. We will stand beside you in trust. We will build peace not only with words but with deeds. The room exploded with noise. Porters cried out questions. The council tried to restore order. Yet amidst all the voices, one truth had already been spoken too clearly to be undone. Clara wiped tears from her eyes as she stood in the crowd. The Queen, still calm, raised her hand, and the noise began to die down again. She looked over the hall and said, Then let history say that peace began not from fear, but from the courage of two voices speaking honestly. Outside the hall, the people gathered in the streets. Word spread quickly. Bells rang in towers that had not chimed in decades. Some distrusted this new hope. but many felt something awaken in them, a belief that maybe peace was not only possible, but already beginning. That night, under the soft light of 2 moons, Queen Leerlin stood once more on her balcony. Below her, the people were singing. The sound rose gently through the city air. She closed her eyes for a moment and felt relief, tempered with quiet strength. She did not know what the future held. There would still be doubts, arguments, and tests. But for the first time in many generations, there was also warmth. Somewhere in that harmony of voices and light, she believed she heard the echo of a simple promise, one that had begun with an unexpected wish, spoken by a queen and answered by the heart of a human. The morning after the great speech, the world woke to a new kind of silence. It was not the silence of fear or tension, but the silence of waiting. Everyone had heard the queen's words. The messages had reached every corner of the galaxy. People were asking if peace could really grow from such simple and human truth. Some called her brave. Others called her foolish. But no one could ignore her anymore. Queen Leerlin walked through her palace with a calm heart. The echo of her steps followed her through the long marble halls. For the first time in years, she did not feel like a ruler trapped by duty. She felt like a person again. The sunlight through the tall windows touched her gown and warmed her face. She thought of her people, of all they had suffered in war after war, and for once she felt that her voice had not been lost in the noise. In another part of the palace, Captain Ethan Cole stood at a window looking down at the city below. Everywhere he looked, he saw banners and flags waving together. He could see people gathering in squares, not to protest or to fight, but to talk. Conversations were full of questions and hope. There was tension too, but it was a new kind, the kind that comes when people begin to believe change might be real. When Ethan turned from the window, Clara was there. She had come quietly, as she often did. "She wants to see you," Clara said with a soft smile. She said, "It is important." Ethan followed her through the winding halls to the private garden behind the palace. The same garden where they had first spoken stood quiet and green under the morning light. The flowers shimmered with dew, and a thin mist hung above the pond. Queen Leerlin stood waiting near a stone bench. "Captain Cole," she said kindly as he approached. "It seems our words have become louder than we ever expected." Ethan gave a small smile. "Yes, Your Majesty. People everywhere are talking about them, so I have heard," she said softly. "Many are afraid, many are confused. But fear often walks beside hope." He nodded. "Hope is worth the risk." She looked at him thoughtfully, as if studying not just his face, but the meaning behind his expression. "Do you regret any of it?" "No," he said simply. "I have seen enough battles to know that peace made with honesty is stronger than peace built on silence." "And you spoke honestly." The queen looked away toward the water. "I once believed truth had no place in halls of power," she said. "Now I think power belongs to those who dare to speak truth, no matter the cost." They stood quietly for a while, listening to the faint sounds of the city beyond the walls. A bird landed near the edge of the pond and dipped its wings in the water. The gentle ripples spread outward, touching every corner of the surface. Leerlin watched them and smiled faintly. "Even the smallest touch can change everything," she said softly. Later that day, the council met again to decide the next steps. The queen listened as they spoke of new agreements and travel plans between the 2 worlds. Some wanted to move quickly, to sign documents and hold public ceremonies. Others wanted to wait, to test the strength of this new bond. Leerlin raised her hand, and the room fell quiet. "Peace is not a performance," she said. "It is a promise, and promises take time. Let the people see us working together, not as rulers, but as neighbors," the council agreed. For the first time in many years, there was not a single argument around that table. That evening, as light faded from the sky, Ethan walked alone through the city's streets. The people recognized him now. Some bowed, some waved, and others simply smiled. He could see joy in their eyes, mixed with disbelief that such a simple act of honesty had brought hope back into their lives. He felt humbled, yet proud. Not proud of fame or recognition, but of what honesty between 2 souls had achieved. When night settled, he returned to the palace once more. The queen was standing on her balcony, watching the stars rise. He joined her quietly. "Look," she said, pointing toward the horizon where the twin moons glowed above the calm city. They said these lights once guided travelers. They guide hearts as well. Ethan smiled. Maybe that's what peace really is. Not a treaty or a rule, but a light that helps people find their way again. The Queen nodded slowly. Yes, a light born from courage and faith. They stood side by side as the cool wind brushed past them. Below them, the city glowed with gentle warmth. Bells rang far away, carrying the soft sound of unity. For once, the stars above did not feel distant. They felt close, as if listening. Queen Lyrillin turned slightly to look at Ethan. When I said those words in the hall, I did not know what would follow, but I think I understand now. It was never about wanting a husband. It was about wanting a partner in this endless journey toward something better. Ethan met her gaze. Then I am honored to walk that road with you. And so they stood together, two hearts bound, not by power or law, but by shared belief. Beyond the palace walls, the world was still uncertain, still learning. But the spark had been lit, and once a flame of truth begins to burn, no hand can put it out. History would one day record that peace began not with armies or kings, but with one woman who dared to speak from her heart, and one man who dared to answer with hope. And long after they were gone, the stars continued to shine brighter over the city that had once fallen silent in awe, reminding everyone that even the smallest words, when spoken with courage, could change the course of forever.